Okay, so this class is actually going to start off similarly to last week, but it's going to go in a completely different direction. So last week I asked, what are some cities that come to mind? So now I'm going to tweak the question slightly and ask, what are Israel's largest cities? So these cities you most probably all have heard of. The largest city is Yerushalayim with about 800,000 people. The second largest city is Tel Aviv with about 500,000 people. And the third largest city is Haifa with about 300,000 people. So all cities that most people have heard of. Now, I want to ask, what is Israel's fourth biggest city? And its fourth biggest city was news to me too when I heard it, especially since I really didn't even know the city existed. Israel's fourth biggest city is a city called Rishon LeZion. So we're going to see where it is on a map. And Rishon LeZion, so when you hear those words, I know for me what comes to mind is the Sephardic Havdalah, the first pasuk, Rishon LeZion hineh hinam v'Yerushalayim mevaser eten, which is a pasuk from Sefer Yeshayahu, and the city was named after this pasuk. So what does the city have to offer? What's it all about? So the question I want to focus on, I always like having an overall focus, not just learning facts about cities, is where do we find the pride in our lives? And Rishon LeZion is a city that is so proud of themselves, and they have so much to be proud of. And we're going to learn, what are they so proud of? And the 3 points we're going to focus on the pride of Rishon LeZion is Israel's flag and national anthem, the Hebrew language, and a creative business. And notice the picture of the Ashridge, that should pique your interest. Okay, so where is Rishon LeZion? Rishon LeZion is about a 50-minute drive from Yerushalayim. The city really, it expands all the way out to the Mediterranean Sea. It's about a half hour to Tel Aviv. So that's where it's located. And now another question I want to ask you. So Israel's beautiful flag, blue and white, very familiar to all of us. 2 stripes of blue and a Magen David in the inside. Did you ever ask yourself, who thought of the design? When did it come about? When was the first flag waved? So those are some of the questions I want to answer today. And to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of Rishon LeZion. In 1882, welcome, Ellen. In 1882, there were 17 families from Russia and Ukraine who came to a desolate hilltop, and they had a dream, and they wanted to create an agricultural community. And it was they came to a place that had nothing but thorns. There was nothing there, and they faced tremendous difficulties. The youngest member of one of the families was 4 months old, and she passed away because they didn't have anything, no water, no electricity, no food. It was very, very hard. And they come to this town and they work very hard. And 3 years into it, it's the day before the anniversary of the founding of this moshav, and some of the leaders get together and they say, why don't we do something to celebrate? Not like last year where we just let it pass. Let's get something together. We might not have a shul built yet or a school, but let's at least acknowledge what we have created so far. And they start collecting money from the different people, and they said if we could get a fund together, then at least we could have money for the festivities. And some of the women even offer to make desserts. So they say, okay, we have a plan. They tell the children that they're gonna get let out of school early, and the children celebrate. And the following day, which was Tetvav Av 1885, they have a celebration for 3 years of Rishon LeZion. And one of the things that happens is the children, they sing, and then after they sing and they're all coming wearing white shirts, very happy, they go to one of the houses of the people that founded the city, and he tells them the history of the place, because as people living in it, they should know how it started and what happened. And there's an additional event that takes place. So here's a picture. So I screenshotted it from a YouTube video from one of the websites connected to Rishon LeZion. You see 2 people depicted. One is named Israel Belkind, and the other one is Fanny Marovich. And you see in their hands that they are sewing. They decide, we need to sew a flag for our yishuv. And they take, you see how they're holding the blue, and then they sew it onto the flag, and they say that we wanted to put words, but we didn't have enough time because we were rushing. And this becomes the first Israeli flag. And it didn't start out as the flag of Israel. It started out as a nice flag celebrating Rishon LeZion. And here you see them placing it down. Wait, hold on. Oh, there was a picture I want. Okay. Here you see them placing it down. Now, what was the development for it eventually becoming? So in 1897, there was the World Zionist Congress and in Basel, Switzerland, and they used the flag. They said this flag, the two stripes and the blue star, this will be the flag of the Zionist movement. And we see when Ben Gurion over here is declaring the state of Israel, he has the Israeli flags in the background. Now, that's what they had, so they just used it. Okay, now Israel's declared, and they get together and decide, we have a new country, now we need a new flag. We can't use the old flag. Also, this very interesting thing that I think we take for granted. One of the reasons why, other than we have a new country and we need a new flag, why Israel wanted to make another flag, as they said, it represents the Zionist movement. And if we make this the flag of Israel, and the Jewish people throughout the world are going to wave this flag, all of a sudden, the countries they're in are going to say, hey, you have double loyalties. You're not really loyal to us. And then they're going to attack them. So they said, we don't want to create any issues of dual loyalty. And they set it on a contest. There were about 400 submissions for the first round. And the rules were as follows. The flag must have the colors blue and white, and in the center could be a Jewish star or 7 gold stars. Now, where does 7 gold stars come from? Every time I hear it, it surprises me. Theodore wrote a few books on his vision of Medinat Israel, and what he said is the flag should have 7 gold stars representing the 7 hours of work each day. And people submitted, I'm going to show you some designs that people submitted. Here's one. Here's another one. Here's another design. Another one. And this was the design that was chosen. The committee put together said, this is going to be the flag of the state of Israel. And there was only one but. The but is that it didn't catch on. And here, the people, wherever they were, you see here a kid carrying a flag that we recognize. The state of Israel could do as many committees as they want, as many official things and declarations, but if the people are not going to agree to it, it's not going to happen. And the flag that Rishon LeZion came up with, that's just what people kept using. And then the committee, all of a sudden they said, what are we doing? Why are we changing the flag? And let's say the amount of work hours switches and there's 6 work hours and not 7. Then what happens to the flag? And they decide, no, we don't need to change something that's working. And this becomes 5 months later. So the country is no flag really for 5 months. This becomes the official flag of Medinat Israel. And now a new committee is formed after the flag is chosen. And what is the committee deciding on? What exact shade of blue the flag would be. So there's always something for people to decide. And let us remember that a very fun trivia fact, the first Israeli flag was waved proudly in the streets of Rishon LeZion. You see here all the children, you see how desolate it is. And this man over here, he was one of the people that was sent to help oversee the Moshav and help with agriculture. I've spoken about it in different Zooms, but in one sentence, to help the Moshavot survive, the Baron Rothschild, he would give money and he would send officers to help oversee what was going on and to teach the people how to farm. So it didn't really work out. There was always clashes, but this is one of the representatives on a donkey with the flag. So we spoke about Israel's flag. Now, what about Israel's national anthem? How is that a source of pride for Rishon LeZion? If you take a trip to Rishon LeZion and you pass by this house, you will notice the balcony. And if you look even closer at the balcony, you'll notice that there's something strange about it. And what we see on the balcony here is musical notes. And for those of you that are musical, you might be able to read the musical notes. The musical notes are the song of Hatikvah. And for those of you that aren't musical, you can just look at the sign on the left over there that has the words of Hatikvah. Why is that on this house? I think it's so cute how they did it on the balcony of Rishon LeZion, because right here lived Shemuel Cohen, who was the person who made up the tune for Hatikvah. He took an old Romanian song and he put it to the words. We're going to talk about in a minute who made up the song. And he lived in this house. Now, nothing that remains is original, but this was where his original house was located. So in honor of that, they put musical notes on the balcony. I think it's such a cute idea. So that's a really fun thing to see. Now, here's Shmuel Cohen, a picture of him. As you continue your tour of Rishon LeZion, you might make your way into a basement of a house, of one of the first houses that was built in the Yishuv, where a man lived for 3 months in 1884. His name was Naftali Hertz Imber, and he is the author of Hatikvah. I never really stopped to think it's something that we sing Yom HaTzmaut, we sing at plays and all these official things, and I know I don't take out the time to think of who made it. So Naftali Hertz Imber, he wrote Hatikvah. Originally, it was 9 stanzas, and it was first published in a book in 1886. And the melody that he had paired to it, each stanza had a different tune. And it didn't catch on because it was too hard for people to remember. And as he spent time in Rishon LeZion, the people were interested in his song, and they said, do you mind if we edit it a little bit? And he said, sure. I want to show you some of his notes. So if we look at the words over here, I just want to let somebody in. If we look at the words, let's look at the last line. La'ir ba David Chana. He wanted to include as part of it that this is the city that David HaMelech was in, and they decided they wanted to change it. So they changed it. Shmuel Cohen puts a new tune, teaches it to the children of Rishon LeZion, and they proudly sing it in the streets. And then from Rishon LeZion, the song spreads to the other Yishuvim. Now, it wasn't until 2004, just mattered so long ago, that Hatikvah was declared by the Knesset to be the official anthem of Medinat Israel. And the same way that the flag became the flag because people just liked it and used it, that's how the anthem just became the anthem, that people just sang it all the time, and that's how it became. So Rishon LeZion is also very proud to have housed Naftali Hertz Imber in their moshav for 3 months. As he was getting better, his doctor recommended that he stay there. And here is Hatikvah, the song that we're all so familiar and proud of. Okay. The next thing I want to address, another pride of Rishon LeZion, is the Hebrew language. When the people came in 1882, the number one thing that concerned them actually was not the growth of the wheat or the growth of the watermelons and whatever else they were growing. What concerned them was the education of their children. They said, what are our kids going to learn? We're in a new country, we're speaking a new language now. What should we teach them? What should we do? And they had a vision that this school, whatever they taught their children, is going to be a new model, different than what they learned in the diaspora. And they decide on 2 things. 1, the language of instruction has to be Hebrew. And 2, that it's very, very important that the children have pride in the land of Israel. Now, there were a few really big problems making the language of instruction Hebrew. 1, nobody spoke Hebrew. And okay, you could say the schools today, we teach our kids Hebrew. They don't speak Hebrew from home, and we teach them, okay? Except we have people that know Hebrew, the teachers then, they didn't even know Hebrew, and they're supposed to teach Hebrew. We have books to help us. They didn't have books. And Hebrew is a much richer language than it was then. There weren't even enough words. And Eliezer ben Yehuda, who I have if you Google him and me, I gave last year a Zoom on him. He was working closely with the teachers of the school to create new Hebrew words. Whatever words they needed, he would create with them. And that was a language of instruction. And kids that went to that school and right later in their diaries, they said they would go on a trip. And the teacher, they were very, very strict, the teachers. They said, you are not allowed to speak English to each other. You must speak Hebrew. And they didn't even know so much Hebrew. So the kids would sign to each other. And eventually it caught on. So Rishon LeZion is proud of having the first Hebrew school in the entire country. And now we think about it like, yeah, of course. And you go to school in Israel and everyone speaks Hebrew, but it was very, very revolutionary. And here's an example of what the classroom looked like. This classroom is part of the Rishon LeZion Museum. At the end, I'm going to go over a few things that I recommend going to in Rishon LeZion. So they have a great museum, and this is a model of the classroom. Something really fun to read. They have one of these papers is the diary of the teacher, and you read what the teacher said. The kids don't listen and they don't concentrate. All they want to do is go outside and play. And you say, things really didn't change in that many years. Students are still students. And as part of the curriculum, the teachers had to take them on trips outside, outdoors to go see. Imagine that was part of the curriculum today. Although in Israel, it really is. I remember when I taught in Barkai in America, the Bnot Shirut, the girls from Israel who would come and volunteer, they were always so surprised that every trip we went on, if we went on a trip, was to a museum. They go, why don't you go to a park? Why don't you go somewhere? It's always cold in Brooklyn, but in Israel, as part of the curriculum, the students go on trips and they go hiking and they see nature. So that was something that the school Habib in Rishon LeZion said, this is very important. We want the kids to love Israel. We want them to sing an hour each week. And I want to now show you just some comparison of the amazing beracha that God has given this country and growth in Rishon LeZion. So just to compare a little bit, the number of citizens. So in 1907, there were 909, and now there's about 230,000. The mode of travel back then, they used carriages. Now there's about 75,000 cars. This is a great statistic. The school, in 1907, there was one elementary with about 200 students and in Talmud Torah. Now there's 20,000 students in elementary school, 9,000 in middle school, and on and on and on. There was one gan. Rishon LeZion is also proud to have the first Hebrew gan. And now there's 242 with 8,000 students. So it's really, really incredible, the growth that the city sees, and is going to see even more. It's soon going to be the third biggest city in Israel. It had also an interesting fact is that it's majority women in the city, and the average age is around 37. Now, this, I have never been here. I told my husband last night, I said, David, you know where I want to go? There's a park in Rishon LeZion I want to go to. What is revolutionary about this park? They made this park, and it's called Gan HaIvri. And you could even notice from, I'm going to zoom in on the pictures, but they said, okay, we're very, very proud that we are the first Hebrew school, we're the first Hebrew Gan. They have so many things to be proud of, and I love it. They embrace it and celebrate it. Let's create a park that matches that. And they have all kinds of activities for kids that are connected to the Hebrew language. So this is really cute. They climb up, and instead of rock climbing using just those colorful shapes, they have Hebrew letters. Think of how fun it would be if you're teaching your little kid how to read, or your grandchild how to read, to take him to a park like this. It's so much fun. They also have here, I'm not exactly sure how this works. I'm sure there's instructions, but just from looking at some of the things written over here, they have different flowers, and another break has different birds. So you could get a whole education about, oh, it looks like here it talks about the categories. You can get a whole education from just playing at the park. Here is some kind of word search, and it's just beautiful. Lily pads, it's a gorgeous thing to go do, to look at how big the park is. So here, it has a list of all the things that you could do. And it just looks like such a fun park to me. And I can't wait to go. And I think it's a fun thing, something new that hopefully you've never been in and would love to visit as well. So we spoke about how Hebrew language was a part of Rishon LeZion. Now I want to talk about another, well, this I'd say is more individual pride, less the city, but it's just when I came up upon it, I said it's such a great story, I need to share it. So I said, look at the picture of the ostrich. In 1907, there was a man named Shmuel Holtzman who was a world traveler, and he grew up Haredi, and his family wanted him to be a rabbi, and it just didn't work for him. He was not interested in that. And he decided that he wants to create a business in Israel because he decided that the climate is suited, where he wants to raise ostriches because he wants to sell the feathers to London. They would use them in fashion, and he thinks he would do very well. So he went to Sudan, and he got 11 ostriches, and he was bringing them to Israel. Now, they were three or 4 weeks old, and as he's traveling, they're doubling in weight from 50 pounds to 100 pounds. He gets to Israel, he gets to the port of Yaffo, which is where everyone got off. And by the time he gets to Rishon LeZion, he only has 6 ostriches, 5 just couldn't make it from the travails of the way. and he raises it in his father-in-law's area. And one of this I'm attributing on my own to Beracha Eretz Yisrael, that the ostriches are small, and usually to get better ostrich feathers, they need to be adults. Yeah, they made such beautiful feathers, and he sold them, and everyone wanted them, and he was very successful. And they have a story that once the ostriches, they got out, and then they tried to capture them, and the citizens of Rishon LeZion did not like the fact that the ostriches are running loose. So he decided he's going to move them to a different area, so he made these cages for them. And in one cage, he put a male and a female ostrich. Now, the male ostrich got excited that he was with the female ostrich, so he started making noise, breaking the cage. He broke loose. So Shmuel Holtzman, he jumps out to catch the ostrich. Now, another fun fact, the only weak point on an ostrich is its neck. If you grab it by its neck, you could weaken it, because its feet, it could kill you with its kick. And it's this huge bird, so he's grabbing the neck and he's struggling with the ostrich. And eventually he gets it under control, brings it to the new place. And then every time, like for months later, whenever this ostrich would see Holtzman, the ostrich would go crazy because it remembered what happened. But it didn't really hold it against him, because the ostriches mated and he had new baby ostriches, and it was really, really a successful, thriving business. 7 years raising ostriches, and it's such a creative thing. Who would think of that? And then in Holtzman, he went to Europe for business, and he left one of his workers in charge. He says, "You're in charge of raising the ostriches." And then World War I hit, and the food for the ostrich, I don't know what they eat, but the food got very, very expensive. And now this is not a good part of the story, but on his own, the worker decided, it's too expensive. Who needs this extravagance? That's how he called it. And he fed the ostriches broken glass, and he killed them all. And it just ended. And that's how the ostrich thriving business in Rishon LeZion from 1907 to 1914 ended. Now, later on in 1928, Holtzman comes back to Israel and he starts something else new. And another beautiful thing that he did, I said he was a world traveler. And as he's traveling around Israel, he's in the world, he's scouting out what species of plants could I bring to Israel, which would grow really well. And he found species of olive trees, and he found pomelas and kumquats and loquats and all kinds of things. And I love how no matter where he was, his thoughts were always on Eretz Yisrael and how he can make it better. And he brought irrigation, and he really, really did a lot of good. And another thing I like about this story is every person has the path that's right for them. He was not right to be a rabbi. He was right to be this world traveler and ostrich raiser and plant grower. And it's great that this is what he ended up doing. Another thing I want to share about him, if any of you are familiar with the area of Gush Etzion, if you have friends that live maybe, a lot of Americans live in Efrat or Neve Daniel. So Holtzman in 1934, he loved Israel, and he bought an area of land that he wanted to start a community there. And then what ended up happening was there were Arab riots, so it all didn't work. But in honor of him, the whole region, and you see on the map, I typed it, is called Gush Etzion. Etzion from the word etz, because Holtzman in Hebrew means etz. So here they remember him and everything that he did. So he really did a lot of good for Am Yisrael, and he was very creative with his ostrich business. Now, some places to visit Rishon LeZion. So they have a museum, and the museum has about, I'd say, a dozen different buildings that have to do with the history. Rishon LeZion is very aware of the history, and the city wanted to preserve the buildings. And you could go into different buildings and you could learn about what they wore. They would actually, it's hard to picture, or maybe not, the women would wear fancy clothing from Europe, because that's what they brought with them in this desolate, dusty place. So you could see the clothing, you could see the farm tools. Rishon LeZion is also proud that the first iron plow was created there. You could see the house with music notes, which I think is really fun. And you could have the best day playing at this park, walking around, riding bikes at this Hebrew park. Also, two things that are very, very prominent in the history of Rishon LeZion, which I didn't mention, but I'll just say what they are. They have a shul, which they're very, very proud of, that they preserved, that is built on the highest point in the city. And they also have this water tower, which is a huge source of pride, because one of the problems in living in Rishon LeZion, so I guess I'm explaining it anyway, was that there was no source of water. And they used to travel 2 hours on donkey to go get water from the nearest moshav, and it's not sustainable. So what they did is they said, okay, let's dig a well. And they dug and dug and dug and dug and dug, and they found nothing. And if they can't find water, they can't live there. And they ended up turning to Habaron Rothschild. We mentioned him earlier that one of his officers was riding on and waving the first flag. They said, please help us. We're crying. We can't make it. And he gave them a huge donation of money, and then better digging tools, and then they dug in a different area, and then they actually found water. And the symbol of Rishon LeZion, which I'm going to show you in a bit, one of their taglines is Matzanu Mayim, we found water, because it was such imagine you're digging, you don't know if you could stay, and then they found water, and they were able to make it. So that's also a big part of the story, which you could go see as well. So here, we'll look at the symbol of Rishon LeZion. It has over here on the bottom, Matzanu Mayim, because it was such pride for them. So I'd like to summarize what we learned today. So we said Rishon LeZion is the 4th biggest city in Israel. And the flag of Israel was created here, was waved in the streets first over here. And we mentioned the 2 people that created the flag. They're sewing it. And they wanted to put writing on it, but they said if we don't have time to put writing. And from there, it really caught on to the World Zionist Congress, and eventually the state of Israel declared it. We spoke about the competition. They said, let's create a new flag. We're a new state. And they had a new flag that they chose, but if the people don't like it and the people aren't choosing to use it, it's not going to work. And they said, we have something great. Let's keep the flag. And the 2 stripes are to remind us of the stripes on the talet. So that we know about the flag of Israel. We also spoke about Hatikvah, which really is very strongly connected to Rishon LeZion. We saw Shmuel Cohen's house that has the music notes, because he didn't create it, but he put together the tune to the words of Naftali Hertz Imber, who the Yishul is very proud that he stayed for 3 months in the basement, and when he was there, he was editing the song. We also spoke about the first Hebrew school, which is so revolutionary that here they want to teach in a language that the kids don't know, the teachers don't know, that doesn't have enough words, but they said, if we're in Eretz Yisrael, it is very important that the kids speak Hebrew, because this is what's going to give them their identity. This is what's going to have them soar. And I really believe that strongly till today, that one of the greatest gifts we could give our children and grandchildren is the gift of the Hebrew language, because when you learn the Torah is in Hebrew, I think that's you don't need any more reason than that. And translations just don't do it justice, because the richness of you have one word used here, same word used there, you need Hebrew for it. So it's just unbelievable now how in Israel, Hebrew is the language. We really see the growth. I also showed you the chart of how it grew in population and in schools and in so many ways. We saw a picture of the really fun Hebrew park that I want to go visit myself. We spoke about the creative business, the Ashridge Farm, which is really thriving. I hate the ending of the story. I almost didn't want to share it, but that's the way it ended. The 150 species that Shmuel Holtzman brought back to Israel, he was always thinking of Eretz Yisrael and how we could help. And we opened with the question of where do we find pride in our lives? Rishon LeZion, I think what's so important about them is, okay, they had all these things first. You could say big deal. They did these things first, but I think the big deal is that they're proud of it, and that they say it to the world, and that they acknowledge it, and they celebrate it. And this over here is the emblem of Hamoasa L'Shimur Atarim. It's this organization where they identify different places in Israel that they think are worthy of preservation. They refurbish buildings. And a very unique thing about Rishon LeZion is they were in full cooperation. They said, wow, history so is amazing. How could we preserve it? And when I take the stories of Rishon LeZion and ask about it in my own life, the reason why they're proud is because they're so aware of their past and they celebrate and acknowledge it. So I ask myself, am I proud of my past? Do I know my past? Is it something that I celebrated? And I think Rishon LeZion, they did a tikkun, they fixed themselves, because the first 2 years they didn't celebrate, they just continued on, and then they said, wait a minute, we need to stop and look at what we accomplished. And I think pride and celebration holds such an important place in a person's life, and it really is important to take the time out to celebrate. And I want to end with a task, and I'm going to give it to myself too, in honor of Rishon LeZion, to pick something you're proud of and celebrate and acknowledge it and share it with the world. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed. I enjoyed speaking and teaching as always. Have an amazing rest of the day.
Adele, your love of Eretz Yisrael comes through in every share that you give. Thank you so much. And thank you for sending me that recording. I never knew Tacheles is a new crayon. That's amazing that they made it a color. I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great as always, Adele.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Adele, you're once again fabulous, fabulous. I don't know how long it takes you to prepare these lessons. I wonder if you sleep.
Well, because you're a teacher, you could answer that and answer that forever. But like really, really forever. But something I do on purpose is I pick a topic I don't know so well, because like there's no tourism, you know. So I say that way when everyone comes back, God willing, I'll have all this new information.
That's fabulous. I have to say, God bless you. I can't wait. Are we on next week? I hope you're going to teach till Pesach.
Yeah. We're on forever, and I'm so happy you're joining. I have at least 20 on YouTube, and they're very short. So if you like really like these topics when you cook, you could listen to it.
That's exactly it. I did my laundry. I did a million things. So that's why I didn't put my face on. I didn't want you to see me.
I do the same thing. I do other things because like, look, Zuma has its advantages.
Yeah, I'm folding my socks as I'm speaking to you. Anyway, take care. I love you. You're really, really doing a beautiful, beautiful job. And it's really a treat for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.